reason. It's recording. Excellent. Bienvenidos. Welcome. This is our first of 3 concurrent sessions, and I am going to present our main speaker, Mr. Adrian Rosado, who is passionate about building leaders of all ages whilst giving corporations and individuals the foundation to create strong, effective teams. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and pre-law, as well as a master's in business administration from Eastern Illinois University. In 2012, Adrian founded the Zion Group. The company commits to providing high-level leadership, diversity training, team building, and professional development to corporations, social organizations, and educational institutions. The Zion Group successfully launched a program, the Millennial Bee, to service universities and organizations in their need to address proper leadership education. In 2017, the Zion Group created a platform, Cultural Clarity Experience, to provide individuals the opportunity to write and be interviewed about how traveling has impacted their perception of diversity from a global lens. Adrian has keynoted cultural communication workshops internationally and has developed curriculum in order to bridge age gaps in the corporate environment. He's currently serving as the Vice Chair of the Business Leadership Council for the National Latino Education Institute, and Adrian's insight, diverse experience, and leadership have served as a cornerstone of the National Latino Education Institute's 2017 initiatives. Without further ado, Mr. Adrian Rosado.
Thank you, Mara. Appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be able to collaborate with you and be able to bring some of my friends on and talk about global issues. So with that said, I just want to speak a little bit about what I do, what the Zion Group has done over the past couple of years, aside from the bio that we were able to hear. So we've created multiple programs for the past 10 years now. We started out in training and development. Within 5 years, we were able to garner government contracts to provide high-level interns to the U.S. Army, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Veterans Affairs Office. This is very important to me because that contract allowed me to provide internships and jobs to students who come from minority-serving institutions. That's very important because 10 years ago when we started the company, the Zion Group, our main goal was to equip students, directors, just anybody who was in support of disadvantaged backgrounds and equip them with skills to be successful in the workforce. So now that we're able to provide jobs as well, it's really become it's become a special place for us in order to be able to create a pipeline from training and development to actual job implementation. So it's been fun, and I've been very happy that so many of my friends from TRIO have been a strong part of the company's growth, and I've been able to collaborate with so many people. So with that said, once we were able to get the government contract, we were also able to get some other contracts in terms of workforce development, and that's how we started the Cultural Clarity Experience. So when we started the Cultural Clarity Experience, the main objective for that was to expose students from disadvantaged backgrounds to global leadership and to global opportunities. So about 3 or 4 years ago, we took our first group of 25 students out to China for a 2-week excursion, global leadership immersion program, and we've been doing that ever since. So outside of those programs and outside of those contracts that I have, it's been a really, really fun ride. I've been able to collaborate with some awesome people. I've been able to meet a ton of awesome people and continue to work with them and continue to support their work. So with that, before I introduce some of the people that we're working with and that are going to be on our panel, I do want to share a quick video of some of our work that we've done, and you'll see some of our collaborators in the video as well. So I'll share the screen really quick and enjoy.
I think people perceive culture shock as you being frozen and having anxiety and not being able to feel comfortable. But the reality of culture shock is it's not about being surprised, but it's about understanding.
For anyone who's thinking about coming to China,
I would say just prepare yourself to be overwhelmed, but overwhelmed in a good way. Overwhelmed by the different culture that you're going to experience, overwhelmed by the number of people that you're going to meet, but to know that you're going to learn and you're going to grow from it.
As long as you just try it and you ask and you talk it through and you understand, it's like the culture shock goes away.
Here I am in China as a part of the Cultural Clarity Experience 2019. Since arriving, I have truly challenged myself, pushing past physical pain, discomfort, and anxiety. And as a result, I've built wonderful friendships that transcend cultural differences. I am becoming a global citizen. Trio afforded me that opportunity.
From this trip, I know a new word, resilience. We are different, yes. And because we are different, we have a lot to learn from each other.
At first, you're gonna be afraid, and that's okay. But once you really just let yourself be immersed because everyone else is, you're gonna realize that it was worth it because you get to clear your own soul and cleanse it and bring back the positivity once you take out that negativity.
I think that the Cultural Clarity Experience and this cultural immersion program is one of the greatest opportunities that I've ever had in my life, and I'm incredibly thankful to be here.
The program really is a great combination of social events, plus cultural events, plus leadership development. We're definitely prepared to learn a lot.
I'm just growing as a person just thanks to this program. And I've done things that I never thought that I'd be able to do, which I'm really eternally grateful for. This is something that will change my perspective forever.
I feel like with the Cultural Clarity Experience, it's just opened up so many new things for me, and it's tied in so many things for me. I can finally hear my parents and my siblings say I'm proud of you. I can finally hear that.
Yes, so that's
excellent.
So that's a little bit of the work that we've done over the past couple of years, and as you can see, we've collaborated with so many TRIO programs, the Department of Ed, just to make a lot of these things come to fruition. With that said, the title of today's panel is Global Leadership in Higher Education and Beyond, and I am so thrilled and so honored to be able to be joined by some wonderful partners, business acquaintances, and just overall good people and friends that I've had the opportunity to know over the past couple of years, and just to talk about how global leadership is prevalent in not only our higher education system, but also the nonprofit sector, the business sector. So we're gonna be talking a little bit about that and how we can create programming, create opportunities and business models to help afford other opportunities like this to students, directors, things of that nature. So without me going too much further into it, I do want to introduce our panel. They'll introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. And we'll start with Miss Carol Carter.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Adrian and Mara. So nice to be here and feel like I am with all of you in person and picturing what it's like in all the different places that this wonderful group represents, some of my favorite places in the world. I am someone who spent 17 years in corporate America, and then started writing books and wrote a book for college freshmen called The Keys to Success. And that opened up a lot of doors for me to start doing trainings with faculty and students directly. And that gave me way to starting a business called Lifebound, where we started publishing books for 5th through 12th graders, and then teaching faculty coaching skills. And now we're teaching those skills to students. That work took me all over the world, working with the K-12 international schools. And so there's a tri-association there that I worked with for a number of years in Costa Rica and Dominican Republic. And so I think it's a lot of your different colleagues that you all work with as well. But we worked in Singapore, Africa, all over. And after a few years, I just really realized that the experiences that some of those students that are part of the private schools get are the kinds of things that our first generation of college and our students who don't come from the resources that would afford them the ability to be in a private school really need, because they're our diverse talent pipeline. So that caused me to start GlobalMindED, which is a 501c3, and it's about creating access and equity to get more women, people of color, underrepresented, all manner of diversity into the education, economic mobility, leadership pipeline, so that we see people from all backgrounds starting companies, being successful, running companies, being successful in a C-suite, being able to be on a board. And that is the great privilege that really led me to Adrian. And the Cultural Clarity Group and the Zion Group are part of what we call our experience network. So we really value being able to work with students who may not have the means, but connect them to incredible people like Adrian, who can take them on experiences around the world, as well as at the United Nations. The International Labor Organization is also one of our partners. So several other groups that can help really bring the world to students who deserve to have that exposure, and that exposure can really launch lives, professions, people's ability to thrive and be fulfilled.
Awesome, thank you, Carol, appreciate it. And a kind of side story in terms of networking, getting to know each other. So Carol reached out to me about 5-6 years ago on LinkedIn, asking me about my interest in GlobalMindED, and she just told me about their vision, their mission, and ever since we had a conversation over the phone about 5-6 years ago, we haven't been able to leave each other's side, right? So it's been awesome getting to know her, getting to know the people that she knows, getting to know the vision that her friends and her colleagues and her network share. And since then, I've been able to serve as a resource as well. And we're putting together our Latino equity panel or equity group as part of GlobalMindED. So I'm really honored and excited to be able to continue working with you, Carol. So thank you. So our next panelist, I will say, is a young lady that I've known for a number of years now, and she's based all the way on the other side of the world in beautiful, beautiful Philippines. I was able to meet her through some business associates that I do in some of the work I do in Asia, and she actually heads a big STEM foundation out in Manila, as well as a brewery, but our initial connection was the STEM Foundation. So I was able to connect her with some of our friends back in the States, and it just kind of snowballed from there, and she's come out with us to China on our cultural clarity experience. She's met our students, she's worked with our staff, and aside from COVID, we had this year planned to take 2 groups out to Philippines as well. So hopefully everything works out so that we'll be able to get our students and our staff back out there to Philippines next year. But with that said, I do want to introduce Erika Aquino from Manila, Philippines.
Hello, everyone. Hi, good morning to you guys, and good evening. I am in your future Um, I am 12 hours ahead, so I am from the future speaking. So yes, so Adrian's right. I do head a STEM foundation called Infinit-O Group Foundation. We provide underprivileged children with opportunities through through different STEM initiatives. Okay, and we also we are actually registered both in the Philippines and the US as a 501c3 nonprofit as well. And we right now, we're in the middle of COVID, we are looking to, we've had to shift from a volunteer-based organization to a funding-based organization. So it's been tough. Kids are the kids that we sponsor are street children, maybe ages about elementary school, you would say. They are, just surviving, trying to not stay hungry, trying to as much as possible. They do live on the streets. Some of them live on the streets. Some of them live in orphanages, but they're still hopeful, and some of them are going to school, which is great, which is fantastic, and they're still, trying to catch up with their lessons. Another thing that I do is I'm also a consultant for tech companies, ed tech startups from Sweden and from Vietnam. I am their local Philippine consultant here, and what we aim to do is give access to technology to those who might otherwise not have that connectivity. And yes, as Adrian mentioned, I do have a brewery, but that's a story for another time. I believe in balance after all. You have something for the heart, you just have something for the head, and you have something for fun. So the brewery is my fun job.
Awesome. Thank you, Erika. Yeah, so Erika,
thank you.
Have had the opportunity to work on several projects over the past couple of years. So it's been really cool to be able to develop a network in not only China, but also the Philippines, and meet some of the most amazing people. So side note, if you haven't been to the Philippines, I highly suggest you put that on your list.
You should go.
You're gonna meet some of the most beautiful people. And for the Caribbean Association, the people from the Caribbean Association, the Filipinos love lechon. So
yep.
They have their own version of lechon. So
yeah.
It's delicious.
Can I just add? You should follow this lady on Instagram called the Lechon Diva. She makes this. Yes, so she makes this lechon that's stuffed with truffles and truffle mushrooms, etc. So it's really good. And even Martha Stewart said, "Oh yeah, I love the Lechon Diva."
It's amazing. So yeah, so especially for the Caribbean people, if you haven't got a chance, Philippines should shoot up on your list. Beautiful scenery, beautiful people, warm culture, and delicious, slightly familiar food. So with that said, thank you, Erika. Appreciate it. And last but not least, we're gonna go over to beautiful Southern California, San Diego, and get to meet a wonderful lady that I had the pleasure of getting to know through actually Miss Carol Carter a couple months back, and I've been able to have some personal conversations with Dr. Alfaro. We've been able to connect, and it's just been a real pleasure to get to know you, Dr. Alfaro, and I feel like, as we continue to move this relationship along, we'll start working with each other, and just your vision and your mission completely align with who I'm aligned with, and I'm excited to hear more about what you're doing, and how we can serve as a resource. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cristina Alfaro out of San Diego State University.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank Carol for this connection. It's a lot of times, I think with this kind of work, it's building these relationships that really help us to push this work forward, because it's a lot of work and we can't do it alone. So I currently am the Interim Associate Vice President for International Affairs at San Diego State University. And when I was speaking with both Adrian and Carol, I remember telling them about, just my own story. I come from a family without very many financial resources. So I never really had a chance to travel. I never really had a chance to physically go see the world. But there was a job that when I graduated as a bilingual teacher from college, and the job was asking, so where have, because it was going to be like an international school. So they asked me, so where have you traveled and what have you learned from your travels? And I had never had the opportunity to travel, but I told them, I have traveled all over the world through books, but my goal is to make sure that I create access for myself and for others to be able to actually physically go see and immerse themselves in the world. And that has been my entire life. You know, my background before coming to this position was bilingual teacher preparation, opening up dual language schools. But the first thing that I started with, I got a $2 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education to run a program, an international teacher preparation program. And I really love the video that you had, Adrian, because it reminded me of the experiences that I put a lot of these teachers through when we would go and work with different indigenous communities, you know, throughout the world. And I like the concept of cultural clarity. It's so important because when we take students, and right now I'm running a very large program at San Diego State that's international affairs, but when we take students, it has to be with a purpose, and the purpose is to really acquire this, I've called it ideological clarity, but I like the cultural clarity because it's like being able to put students through this dissonance and really allowing them the opportunity to juxtapose, you know, their world with the worlds of so many others in the nation. So our university is positioned right on the border of Mexico and California. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is what we call a reborder conference, because it's kind of embarrassing many times when we send students all over the world from San Diego State and they don't even know their region. So we've made it a very specific goal for our students to really understand their region so that they can and go juxtapose when they travel the world to see, you know, the differences and more importantly, to understand that cultural clarity that the video that we saw this morning was about. But anyway, very happy to be here, and we'll talk some more in a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Alfaro. Appreciate it. So with that said, I think we kind of have a good understanding of the theme of the program and how everybody fits in. So let's get directly into the questions as I really am excited to see some of the content that's going to come out of this. It's a lot of wonderful minds and yeah, I think that we're going to have a good time. So with that said, global leadership in higher education and beyond. So now let's dig a little deeper with that. So let's go into the first question. So from your perspective, why is the understanding of global leadership more important today than it was 10 to 15 years ago? What have been some things that have required us to broaden our thinking and pivot our programming and business models? So in essence, you know, how has this whole global leadership, how has it grown so large and so quickly over these past 10 to 15 years? I put the question in the chat box, but let's start with Miss Carol Carter. What's the understanding of global leadership? Why is it more important today than it was 10 to 15 years ago?
Well, one of the reasons is I think that it's so clear how interdependent our world is because of all the things we share. You know, we share the air, we share the water, we share a lot of human talent, and every country has people from all over the place, you know, in each country, almost every country. And it's especially true in a place like the United States where, you know, by, I don't know, 2030 or 2040, it's going to be majority, you know, Latino population. And then we have so many other rich cultures represented as well. So this idea that when you graduate from college and you go to work for a company, those companies really value the people who are already, as college students, citizens of the world. And you may be a citizen of the world because you've immigrated here from another country. You may be a citizen of the world because you're fluent in both Spanish and in English. You may be a citizen of the world like Cristina shared that she hadn't traveled, but she read about people all over the world, and that made her really value people from all over the world. So I think that notion that we are all interdependent, and also, as Cristina said, we all need each other. So we can't solve the most gnarly problems in the world, the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN and partners have outlined. We can't solve those things without uncommon collaborators, without the amazing young people that we serve, our emerging talent base. And we're so interdependent. I think, this is the day after the elections in the United States, 2020. And this country in recent history has really never been more divided. So it's a time to take all these rich cultures, to take the amazing qualities in all the different people and understand people at a really, basic human level. Because if we don't understand them, if we don't respect ourselves and each other, we can't do great things in business or government or in education or higher ed or anywhere, because we're limited in our knowledge. So I think, that's another reason at this moment in time, 2020, I call it the year of broken open. It's like all the things that aren't working are falling away because we are having these multiple pandemics. But I think that those are some of the things that really make us have to understand, appreciate, and bring the best out of each other, all of us right now, to solve and to make the world the place that it can be. Oh, and including my cat says, and I want to make it right for cats too. She likes to come to my Zoom meetings.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol. I wanna shift over to Dr. Alfaro really quickly. So to Carol's points, I want to dig a little deeper. So, we're talking about how everybody has to work. We have to cooperate together, right? We have to intertwine, and we have to work interdependently, if you will. So with that said, you've been working in this space for many years now. Specifically, over the past 10, let's be very specific, the past 10 years, how have you seen your study abroad program grow and the number of students who come from non-traditional backgrounds? What's been the shift, and how has that grown thus far?
Okay. Well, right now at San Diego State, I've been in this particular position as far as Associate Vice President for International Affairs for 1 year. This is my second year here, but I've been at the university for over 2 decades doing similar work. But I think that one of the things that I see, I want to kind of follow up on what Carol said, is that we need to really prepare globally conscious citizens. And I think that especially at our university, we are an HSI, which is a Hispanic Serving Institution. So one of the things that I found when I came into this position was that we are ranked number 5 in study abroad at SDSU. So in other words, we send students all over the world. But when I started to dig in to see who are the students that get to go, guess who they are, right? And they were not our Latino. They were not our Black students. They were not, our, students that really came from low income resources were not really able to do that. So one of the things that we have really focused on is how do we begin to invite and encourage and advocate and provide resources wherever possible for these students to be able to participate, because it's very lopsided when we do that. And the main thing for us at San Diego State University is that we are very privileged to have a president, Dr. Adela de la Torre, who is very, very committed to preparing globally conscious citizens and innovative ethical leaders. That's whole one sentence, right? Because it's going back to the cultural clarity, is that if we are just going abroad to go abroad, but you really do not engage in, as we saw in the video, in really interacting and co-living with the individuals that whose country you're in, and also engaging the language. I think that's another really big piece, because I think Adrian and I, in the conversation that we had, we were talking about you can't separate culture from language. you've got to engage in both. It doesn't mean that you have to become fluent, although it's it's a really good thing if you can. But I think when we start to look at all of this, and we need to begin to reimagine and reconstruct global education as it's been for the last 10 years. So I think that one of the things that has happened with this pandemic is, and all of these anti-immigrant attacks, that we look at the politics and we look at the policy, we look at the context that we're in right now and say, how can we reimagine the work that we've been doing and with a focus on equity and creating access for all students. So I think that is what, when you look at ideology, I think that is what has really pulled me to want to be part of this group, to work with Carol and to work with Adrian in the work that we're doing so that we can continue to do it together.
Awesome. And I think something that really stands out to me that I was taken away from as you were speaking is that now, these past couple years, people like ourselves are in the position of influence, are in the position of gatekeepers, if you will, for funding, for opportunities, where the years past, that wasn't necessarily the case. So those opportunities weren't being open, and those opportunities weren't being brought up to the top list or top priority on the list, right? And now we realize, with all the work that I do, all the work that you do, all the work that Carol, Erika, that we all do, that this global leadership component is extremely important, more so important than certain other things that are being taught. And I'm sure Ms. Maraluna can even speak to that as well, as she's been taking students to the US from Puerto Rico, and I'm sure she's seen the difference and the advantage of being able to expose some of the TRIO students over here to, even though it's, the mainland, it's still a completely different culture. So, it's these, we don't have to think Chicago, California to China or the Philippines, right? There's just as much of a culture shock and difference if you take a student from Puerto Rico to Nashville, Tennessee. So, so I just think, as I'm going through this, these are all very important things for us to take into account, because as we continue to grow all of our programs, this is how we're going to do it. So with that said, Erika, I want to head out to the Philippines. Talk to me. So what's the perspective over there in terms of global leadership, and why you're such an advocate of it, and how have you seen that shift over the past couple of years, not just in your profession, but also in the Philippines in general? I've noticed that the Philippines has become quite a destination over the past couple of years.
It has become a tourist destination. Tourist numbers are going up. But I'd like to point out that 2.2 million Filipinos are now working abroad, whether as professionals or as blue-collar workers. There's 2.2 million. That's about 2% of all Filipinos. They go abroad, they come back, they put in dollars. One of our biggest factors for the economy, our biggest boosters for the economy is remittances. Okay, so people come home getting that global perspective, whether you are a domestic worker or a doctor. You come home and you find and you want to apply the best that you've learned into your own hometown. Okay, so for instance, just something that comes to mind is this pandemic, of course, everything that happens. One flaw that I've seen with many organizations and with many countries is that hubris. Okay, the thinking where, okay, if it doesn't come from me, then I don't want to hear it. If that idea does not come from me, I will dismiss it. And I've found that the best organizations are those that take the best of everything. Okay, they're open to learning. They're open to learning from other cultures. For instance, our own disaster preparedness, as I've mentioned before this chat, we just experienced the biggest storm of 2020 here in the Philippines. And disaster response is actually, we've learned that from other cultures such as the United States, actually even the Caribbean, I think. And those practices, I believe, can easily be shared with other people. And I think other countries, other organizations, they have the experiences that we may not necessarily have. At the same time, we may have experiences that you may not necessarily have. It's this exchange of ideas that's always welcome here. In fact, just on a basic level, if you go out at night here in Makati, the business district, which of course that's pre-pandemic, now everything's shut down. But pre-pandemic, you'd go out and you'd see authentic restaurants from Pakistan, from there's a Puerto Rican one, a Peruvian one. I don't think you've been there, Adrian, but Filipinos take the best of the world and bring it here and adapt it to themselves. At the same time, there are so many people that have come to the Philippines and visited and have stayed. Okay, which is quite interesting. They fall in love with the place. They set up a business, mostly restaurants, breweries, and they just never leave. So it's quite an interesting time for the Philippines right now. We have people going out, but we have people coming in, and I really hope with global leadership we can take the best into this country, and at the same time have a wonderful exchange of ideas.
So, in terms, I think you brought up a really good point in terms of just as many people that are coming in, there's a ton of Filipinos going out, and they're working all over the place, right? I mean, all over the world they're working. So, has that always been the case, or do you see that just happening over these last couple of years?
It's been the case for quite a number of years, maybe in the last 15, 20 years or so. But of course, the numbers have increased with the demand for nurses, doctors in the US and other countries. The number of students as well has gone up. The number of nursing students, physical therapists, doctors. I think one of our greatest exports is missioners, actually, and it's a little it's a little disconcerting that some of our best minds do go abroad. Thankfully, some of them do come back.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome, thank you. And I think that, you know, when I hear this type of feedback, and this is you know, kind of a direct point to where we're going is, you know, part of my job specifically, and Carol and Dr. Alfaro's as well, is to pinpoint these areas of influence, especially for me, where I see this trend happening. How can I better equip our students, our staff, to recognize these different parts of the world where there's this big dynamic shift, right? So, you know, it's identifying these places that I feel that students and staff should be at, so that they could understand that culture and be able to work with people from that culture, especially considering they're going to be all over the place, right? So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I think you and I had a conversation about that too, Dr. Alfaro, in terms of the different places where we choose, right? You know, it's like you think of South America, Central America. For mainland people, that's pretty easy for study abroad. Very rarely do you see, you know, study abroad programs going over to Asia, Southeast Asia. But how are we connecting our people from Central America and South America to the people from Southeast Asia and Asia? So, you know, and that's part of the reason I did some of this as well. So with that said, I do want to go to our second question. In higher education specifically, how can administration increase the opportunities and interest of students that come from underrepresented backgrounds to participate in and seek out global leadership programs, whether it be study abroad or language and culture courses? And I'd like to start with Dr. Alfaro.
Thank you. I love this question because in higher education right now, since I stepped into this role, I've been looking to see what other people are doing all over the world when they talk about global education or international education. And a lot of it unfortunately does not have to do with really developing these global leaders that are really set to understand where they travel, to really understand the political struggles, the desires, you know, the culture, the language, you know, the people. A lot of times what ends up happening in these programs is that students travel together, they stay together, they speak their own language, and then they criticize what they see. And they come back and they go, oh, we're so glad we live in San Diego because we have everything here. Then we have failed, you see. And I see that, and I can be really critical because we, like I said, we are ranked number 5, but I've been digging into this. So luckily right now, again, going back, I have to give credit to our leadership, which is our president, that really supports this. And we are now developing, we're at a point in time where we are developing a new university strategy, you know, just for the entire university. But in one of those strands, it's global education. And it's preparing globally conscious citizens. So when you're talking about higher education, if we're going to make a change like this, it's got to start from, it's got to be bottom up, you know, but we have to meet somewhere. A lot of times what I have found in the past, it's like you're crawling up, you know, you're working and saying, we should do this. But if you don't have administration, you know, leaders that are really committed to this and really understand the importance of this, it can't happen. So right now, we're at a very special point in time where right now I am leading the global strategy strand for the university. So I'm super excited about that. And so, and also one of the things that we did is, you know, you look at shared governance, and so that the Senate also takes responsibility for the work that we do globally. I think that everyone is now convinced that we must prepare global leaders. This is very important. So now we've developed a university Senate committee that is diverse. We have people from, professors from India, from Asia, from, Johannesburg, different places, so that we can begin to say, we don't all just have to go to Italy, or not everybody has to go to Europe. You know, those are the, because when you start looking at where do students go and why, right? And why is it that they're not going to the Philippines? Why is it that they're not going, deep into some other indigenous communities? So with the global strategy that we're developing right now, we are participating in what we call the Internationalization Lab. So we're looking very specifically at what are the global learning outcomes that we want. We've never had them. Okay, so this is where you say, I'm going to go ahead and use your term, is, cultural clarity, looking at, just how do they engage, as I said before, and we're developing these outcomes right now through the Senate. How do they engage the language? And another thing that we're doing is, because my background is in dual language education as well. So we are going to be piloting this next semester in the spring, what we're calling the Global Biliteracy Seal. So these are students that travel throughout the world, and they learn the language. And of course, it would mean that they would have to take courses. And then they come back, and we are preparing an exam for them where they would be able to obtain a Global Biliteracy Seal. So right now we're doing it with the business department. And so they're super excited about this, because now when they graduate with their degree, they're going to have a seal that says that they are global and they are globally conscious, and that they are able to speak the language, whatever that language is. Right now we're starting with Spanish because that is an area that I know that I can control. But the idea is to be able to go into different languages, to be able to obtain a Global Biliteracy Seal. So this is a way that we can incentivize our students to engage the language, and to many times, they end up just hanging out with each other and speaking English, and they don't even give themselves an opportunity to engage the language and the culture of the country that they're visiting. So to answer your question, I think in higher education, we have to have a very specific, explicit global strategy with global learning outcomes, and that leadership from all levels are in on this. So that's what we have right now. So I'm really excited. So I hope that we are able to report a lot of progress in this area.
That's phenomenal to hear. It really is. a couple things one thing that really stood out to me, the Global Biliteracy Seal, that's phenomenal. So it's interesting that you say that, because I'm working with several universities right now and for their Upward Bound programs, so their high school programs, right? And what we've been doing is, with our connections abroad, we've been implementing 16-week, every Saturday for 16 weeks. They learn and they get homework, and they learn from our team Mandarin, history, and language.
Oh, wow.
So it's so crazy that you mentioned that, because that's since when COVID happened, we weren't taking the trips, right? So my team and I, we came together and we said, all right, how can we continue to provide value? And then a few of the directors said, hey, can we provide Mandarin language and culture to prepare them for the exact things that you were saying? So, now we're taking it away from Europe, or not taking it away, but shifting it and broadening that perspective. And to your point, what does that do? Now that garners additional interest. And by them learning the language and the culture, whether it be virtually right now, that's going to allow them to want to learn more physically later on. So that's very interesting. And then they get a certificate as well. So we'll have to chat a little bit more about that. But I'm glad we're all on the same page. So let's shift over to beautiful Denver, Colorado. Talk to me, Ms. Carter.
Well, I am an outlier, I'll say, within higher education, because I come from the business world. But I will say that when I saved all my waitressing money and went over to study in Spain when I was in college, it just changed my life. And I was from Tucson, so I had a lot of influence of, taking the train from Nogales to Guadalajara and Guaymas and different places growing up. But I saw the value of that, and I saw the value to my career of so many other things beyond learning the language, beyond the culture. And what you said earlier was so key, that there were some students from Dartmouth and they would want to go out and party. And my brothers were like, do not talk to the American students, because you need to be only with Spanish speaking students. And you have worked so hard to get over there. So don't blow it by wanting to be an American talking to people speaking English. So I followed that to the letter, and thank goodness I did, because why? People want to, sometimes they're from America, they speak English, they want to go to countries where English is spoken, like Australia or, the places in the UK. But the truth is, the more that students are willing to risk, the more that they are willing to put themselves in situations that scare them, intimidate them, stretch their ability of what is known, the more they're going to grow and the more value they're going to have, I think, in the world of work. And actually, I think that's how life is more fulfilling. So I will say, from the higher education standpoint, I think we need to be operating with a lot less of the colonial hierarchical structure. I think we need to have a more flat structure, where the richness of our first-gen students, their experiences, like, Dr. Alfaro, she was one of these first-gen students. Imagine if she had been able to be at the table with her college president as an 18 or 19-year-old, what that president would have learned from someone like her, how she could have opened the vistas of thought to someone like that, so that from the university standpoint, more college presidents will be like the president that she has now at her institution. But that person is unusual among the way that some colleges are still structured. So I think we really have to look at some of the ways in which the divide can be bridged, because we are giving students an audience with people at the seat of power, and that's the college president, that's the provost, that's people, in Christina's jobs. And the more that we allow them to have that voice, the more universities around the world will bake this in to what they are doing. And I think that just has to happen. And I will share too that I have been in Manila. I've been a guest in the Philippines. It was wonderful. And then a few years later, I went over to Qatar in the Gulf region, and I learned that there are so many people from the Philippines that are nurses in Qatar. Well, I had no idea. And how many of them are working there, sending money home to their families in a place like the Philippines. So some of those things, you can only get those insights when you're traveling to different countries. You can't always read about these things and see beneath the level of what's going on. And that's why it's so valuable for us to build all these different bridges, both virtually and after COVID, in person, and for these incredible students who don't come from the wealth and the background to be toe to toe with some of their colleagues whose parents are sending them all over the world starting when they're 3 years old. And that's another, that's another bridge that we really have to be able to build, so that those students have the same kinds of opportunities for getting great jobs, going on to promotion pathways, or going on to get their PhDs, becoming presidents of universities, whatever, that they have those opportunities, because we can knit these experiences together to allow them to be able to go do that.
Well, and I think that the beauty, to your point, Carol, I think the beauty of even being just so connected now in terms of technology, it allows, and maybe Dr. Alfaro, you can, be a proponent to this, but it allows our students, it's not that much of a sell for us anymore to say, hey, student XYZ, or hey, staff member XYZ. There's a reason that you need to get out of the United States, right? Not just for leisure, if you will, but also the broader your network, the more business and career opportunities you get. So that's been the biggest thing for me, right? So my business goes from training and development to global strategist in 6 years. How does that happen? And why are the two titles differ so greatly? And it's just through work and putting myself out there, but also the connections that you established. So now you have people saying, hey, Adrian, how can we work with you? How can we connect with you? Well, what am I really leveraging? I'm leveraging, my strategy and my knowledge, but I'm also leveraging the network, right? Yeah. So, I think that over the years, and this kind of integrates both the questions that we were just talking about, over the years, this type of strategy has been very apparent to students. They've been able to see their access just online, and now they want to be able to do it in person. So now the next step falls on us with providing those opportunities and providing the funding and whatnot. So with that said, Ms. Erika Aquino, talk to us.
Okay, really great insights from both Cristina and Carol. And I'd like to offer another perspective. Like Carol, I've been fortunate enough to have been traveling since I was a child. My father was an airline executive, so I was able to go everywhere, do everything, and I continue that until today. However, I do work with a lot of low-income students, and the perspective is a little different here. Okay, so a lot of people speak their local dialect. Just for everyone to know, we have about 187 local dialects and languages here in the Philippines, and 2 official ones, Filipino and English. Now, it's really difficult for the typical Filipino to speak in English, okay? And with my own beneficiaries, I try to speak in English because they do want to practice, but a lot of them feel very intimidated by that global mindset, by that global perspective. And one thing I've noticed is that we tend to be subservient as a culture. I don't know whether it's from our history or whether it's from our culture itself, but we tend to be very service-minded, I would say. And that translates to, maybe not getting too much not getting enough confidence to speak to the world, but rather, there was one incident. I don't know if you remember, Adrian. We were in Bicol, and this lady kept talking to me in Filipino, and but the conversation had to include us both. And I said, why don't you talk to him? He's the one paying. and you were a little frustrated already. And that's sort of the mindset that I get here. And to have that global perspective, I'm trying to see how we can all work together as well, where, what if, your college students can teach virtually somehow, or converse with my kids somehow in English? What if there's a program in which, our kids show what life is like for them? How do they take shelter from a storm? How do they, how do they live on $400, $100 a month? How does a family of 7 live on $100 a month? What if we can show that? And what if we can show, what if we can also encourage the young children or the high school student or the university student that there is a world out there, that they don't have to be stuck in that one place, because a lot of them still feel that way, and even our own government, for instance, our higher education, etc. We have a trade school, a national trade school, and some of it, what they teach us, for instance, it's very blue collar, okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what if you can do more? Okay, we have one child, for instance, who wanted to be an engineer, and his parents just laughed at him and said, "Why are you doing that? You're not even studying. You're not even in school. Why should you even dream that way?" And I think bringing that global perspective to the Philippines includes that, giving them the confidence, giving them that, bringing the world to them if they can't go out to the world.
Yeah, no,
That's an awesome idea. I just want to say that. And Adrian, we could run that stuff through GlobalMindED programming, country by country.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. That's and I'm glad you prefaced it with, "Let me provide a different perspective." Erika, yeah. Thank you for that, because at the second you said that, Dr. Alfaro, Carol, and I, we were really talking from what we've been working with over here. So when you said, let me look at this from a different perspective, I wasn't catching on at first. And then it all started to unravel, and I was like, that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Because to the question specifically, how are we getting students? How are we getting directors? How are we getting staff interested in global leadership? Well, it doesn't always have to be them going over here, but how about if they're interacting? How about we're doing cross collaborations? Right? And this is something for us to think about, Carol and Dr. Alfaro as well. So thank you for providing that input, Erika. We'll definitely, I'm sure we'll be chatting about that soon.
I'm sure. Well, actually, it just came to me when both Carol and Cristina mentioned it. And I'm like, how will they be able to realize that people here $100 a month, sometimes a year, to feed a family of 7? And how can this family of 7 learn from the college students in the U.S.? Kind of popped in my head.
No, it's awesome because it provides a similar experience for our people over here. They're looking for that experience. So, it's
for sure
a win. So with that said, I do want to start bringing our panel to it's not a close, but I want to start wrapping it up. And I want to close with our last question. And after our last question, I will ask each panelist to give a quick closing statement. So with our last question, what are some best practices? This is a good one. What are some best practices that administration in the higher education and business sectors can do to increase buy-in and funding for global leadership opportunities and or programs, whether it be with their company or at their universities? Who wants to take that?
Cristina, you start, and I'm making some notes.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, this is a very good question because it forces us to think deeply. But when you talk about best practices and we're looking at to increase buy-in for global leadership opportunities, what comes to mind is global diplomacy. I just completed a literature review on global diplomacy because I think that this is what we need, whether you're talking about the business sector or you're talking about higher education. But how are we now beginning to learn to work with each other, to understand each other, to respect each other, to honor each other, to honor the families, as Erika said, that have to feed 7 people with a few dollars or whatever. How can we learn from that? Because, and I think I hear so much, especially at the university, students that just are not, they're in their bubble and they remain in their bubble. And so it's not until you start to really look at the blind spots. There's, one of the things that we're doing with my own staff right now is say, we all have blind spots. And unless we actually look for what those blind spots are, you're going to continue to repeat, whatever it is that you've been colonized to do. So I think it's looking at how do we begin to decolonize what we call global education, and how do we really shift it to really moving minds and not just moving bodies, but just really moving the minds, so that and I'm thinking specifically like it's here in San Diego, because we are so close to the border. Just our diplomacy with the binational, when we look at Tijuana, you hear students say like, oh, I'll never go to Tijuana, it's horrible, they kill people, or you hear these terrible things. It's like, really? But they're human beings over there, and there's some beautiful culture. And it's like everywhere that you go, people say like, you actually cross the border. And to me, it's like, if I go to New York, I know where not to go, how to be careful. Same thing when you travel to different places, whether it's India, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's Mexico. But I think that it's really working on developing this respect and this ethical leadership with global diplomacy, that if we can really pitch that, and that's why I tell you I did my literature review on global diplomacy, because I want to start to look for some funding on that has to do with global diplomacy, binational transborder diplomacy. So anyway, because if we are able to look at how this could help the entire world, not just our university or our transborder region, but looking at it as especially right now with the leadership that we've had and in the White House, that we need to be able to shift the narrative to really learn and bring back the respect and the honor that our students and our families deserve.
Awesome. So global diplomacy is one of your main themes for creating buy-in in terms of at the university level. We're creating global diplomats through the university, through these bilingual SEALs, global bilingual SEALs, so multiple programs that ultimately say, hey, University XYZ, you're going to get represented by these students, in essence. Interesting. Carol, you want to take that?
Yes. Okay. So I made some notes. One of the things that GlobalMindED has is some assets in content. So for freshmen, we have GlobalMindED collaboratives with not only how to do well freshman year, but how to do well in all of college as you look towards your career. And these elements of cultural clarity, of being a global citizen, these are the things that are laced through that kind of curriculum. I would like to see every college have some version of that, either for summer bridge or for freshmen, to start off, whether they're first gen or not, because I think like Christina's mentioning, there's a lot of these students from privilege and they've been in a bubble and they don't understand the world outside of where they've grown up in their neighborhoods. And that understanding is so key, because frankly, the money has to flow in two different directions. Half the world lives on less than $2 a day. And then there's a very few number of people who have the most resources with which we can be solving so many of the world's problems. So that's one thing, the GlobalMindED Collaborative. The second is this idea of inclusive coaching. We also work really closely with advisors and faculty on how do you set up a culture, a common denominator at your university where everyone is inclusive, and what does it look like to be inclusive, and how do you understand what your unconscious biases are, or your point of view that may be keeping out a certain type of student, and maybe it's neurodiversity, maybe it's not cultural or race or class or gender. But these are things people aren't aware of, and they keep certain amazing, talented people from going forward and really exploding their opportunities. And the other thing I'll say is we've recorded now almost 70 different video sessions, mostly on topics of diversity and inclusion and equity with diverse people. And I'm thinking that if every college used those materials tied to certain courses where students could see people who are diverse looking like them, even if they don't see it at their universities, that would be very, very powerful. And I think there's some easy ways we can repurpose some things we're just sitting on. We also have a newsletter where you all have been focused. And Erika, we're going to have to do a profile of you for the newsletter. But even if students from privilege read this every day, they're going to learn about amazing students that make their world so much more rich. And how can we make some of those things just basic things that universities plug into? And the final thing I'll say is I think young people are so passionate about making a difference. And if we really connect with the Sustainable Development Goals, what big world issue do they really want to solve and be a part of? That knits into the people in these different countries that are passionate about those same kinds of SDGs, whether it's health, whether it's gender equity. So I think like really thinking through with the UN and the SDGs, that idea of very much links into Cristina of the global diplomacy, but it's also, this is a time for real big global leadership action because we don't have a lot of time for these things that have to be solved.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Erika, talk to us.
All right. Okay. So both of the panelists here are in the higher education space in some way. I am not. But what I've learned and what I've noticed is that there is always a way. Whatever problem, whatever question, there is always some answer. And when a student or when there is a program, when there is a need, and there's obviously a need to connect, to support students, to encourage confidence, to encourage a global mindset, there is always a way that a student can reach out and become who they want to be, and become, and work for the issues that they want to work on and solve the problems that they want to solve. And it's up to the business sector, the higher education sector, the nonprofit sector to all work together to make sure that the next generation, and this generation, in fact, thinks not only of themselves, but of other people. As I've noticed, I just want to point out that here in the Philippines, we've been watching the US election, and one question that was asked was, do they know that they can affect the rest of the world just by choosing their president? And the answer is probably not.
Some do.
Probably not. And I would like to have this. That's my vision, actually. That's my own personal mission, to give opportunities to those who may not have them, and provide them with endless possibilities. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we've all, in terms of what everybody said up until this point is very relevant and very direct. I do want to add a little bit though. So when I think of best practices, when I think of buy-in, when I think of funding for global leadership opportunities, I want to take it maybe in a different direction. So when I thought about this question, the reason I thought about this question was because when I'm working with businesses, when I'm working with entrepreneurs, when I'm working with business owners, large businesses, small businesses, I meet people from all over the place, right? And then especially in the United States, be specific, Chicago business owners. Chicago being a very, very large and influential city. So, when I'm speaking with these business owners, a lot of the times they're looking for this high quality talent, right? But what they're looking for are these formally educated talent. So talent that's just going to university and getting this degree and then can come work for them, right? But then they don't get upset, but then they get perplexed when these students' social skills, adaptability skills, group work skills are not up to par, and they find themselves having to spend money to train these employees. So now I'm looking directly at an employer-employee relationship, right? So how are we providing these opportunities to allow people, not just students, people to become better in the workforce, to become more cohesive in the workforce, to become well-versed in the workforce? If I have an opportunity that says, hey, I can get your business and scale it if we decide to take 2 portions of it and move some stuff to Asia, who's gonna head up that portion? And nobody's comfortable enough to do that. You just missed out on a X amount of dollars to build your company or build your business, right? If I say, hey, I have a friend, Dr. Alfaro, that can hook us up with some development people in Mexico, but you're not comfortable enough to take on and lead that team, or even comfortable enough to collaborate with people from that culture, then you just missed out on a whole ton of not even money, but just opportunity, right? So, that's the angle. Everybody was right? There's no real answer to that. It was just all about perspective. And, after hearing, Carol, Erika, and Dr. Alfaro speak about that, that's the way I looked at it. I look at how are we preparing at the other level, the students that you're talking about, Dr. Alfaro, how can I help them go to the next level and get that job at United Airlines, but not just based in Chicago or LA, but based in Singapore, right? And have them comfortable. How can we get some of our people, Erika, from the Philippines to be comfortable enough to take a pharmaceutical job in Puerto Rico, right? So, it's all about this cross-globalization that helps us all. And, if we look at higher education and we look at business, it is all intertwined at every single level. So I think that we've had a wonderful discussion up until this point. There's a lot of great information that was shared. I am extremely appreciative to you, Carol Carter, to you, Erika Aquino, and to you, Dr. Alfaro. Let's keep this conversation going. Mara Luna and the whole team over at the Caribbean Association of Educational Opportunity Programs, thank you for allowing us this platform. We will share the